Hello. Yes, we're going to be doing a watercolor of that scene of Monhegan Island in Maine. Okay, I'm going to start with a wash of, I have phthalo blue and cerulean blue mixture. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get like a kind of like a striated sky, very subtle. In the photograph, there's just a little bit of a like a cloud. It's not exactly a thick cloud, it's sort of just a wispy one. So what I'm trying to do is, as you can see, I am moving the paper around to achieve um, those those shapes. I need to have the lights, the light shaft on the left side, and I think I get it. I get like right there. There was a little bit of a, I don't know, little splash, and it actually messed up that area, so I had to go back again. Luckily, it was wet enough where it didn't create a problem. If you work fast, and let's say you're going over a spot that's almost it's getting dry, it's not exactly dry, just go over it with a lot of water, like a lot of wash, and usually you can get that out. And those are things sometimes commonly referred to as cabbages. They bloom. That's when you put down paint, a wash that isn't, that the underlayer or the undercoat, or the first wash I should say, is not thoroughly dry and it's not thoroughly wet. When it's kind of damp, it creates this blooming effect. Sometimes it's called cabbaging. So we want to try to avoid that. So I think that's it. I think that's where I stopped. I kind of like the shapes in that sky. And now I put a little bit of the blue and brought the blue into the mountain, or the bluff, I should say. Here I'm trying to get a dry brush effect to get the feeling of the light hitting the water in that area. I think I got it. I might go back over that later on. Remember, this is part one, I should preface by saying, because I want to get you guys working on something, those who are doing watercolor, and I felt this was a good starter video. It's basically, I'm kind of halfway through the washes. Now, what makes this painting so time consuming is, well, it's obviously the shapes of the rocks and making sure we take time to draw as we paint. So I do have a pencil drawing underneath. Now I do pencil with watercolor because you need to have a foundation, but I didn't get super detailed with any little detail in here. Again, these washes, what would happen is when we put the wash over, it has a tendency of just covering the line. So even if we did a lot of drawing, chances are we would lose those dark pencil marks. So now here I'm just trying to get shapes in the water. I'm following the photograph, but I'm also designing my shapes too. And this is something that we have to kind of think about when we're doing watercolor. The idea is to simplify, okay? Try to make everything simple. Don't overcomplicate things, especially in watercolor. You don't want to add more work than you need to. So here I'm drawing the surface so I can apply the next surface. So yeah, still adding some more blue. And this is basically this is my first wash. Now this is interesting. Okay, so the colors that I used for the background, again, in the water I added a little green to the same color I used for the sky, which was it was the phthalo blue, cerulean blue, and a lot of water to get it light. Now what I'm doing is I'm adding burnt sienna, little sap green. Here I added a little orange to the burnt sienna just to get it. So what I'm trying to do here is, if you refer back to the photograph, which everybody should have, by the way, um, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just get the intrinsic colors of the rocks without getting the lights and the darks. And if you study the photograph, so as I was looking at the photograph before I even painted in the sky, I was trying to work out where those colors are going to be. Now, the blue that I use there is a cerulean blue U, which happens to be a little on the opaque side, but that's okay. That's going to dry like a regular wash, and that's the area kind of right in the middle, right next to the burnt sienna on the lower right-hand corner. Now, I'm just trying to get contrast, really just color blends here. And also keeping in mind not going too dark, because what's going to happen here, this layer is going to be the average layer, and what will happen here is when I start to paint, the darker, and I think I start in with some of the darker washes, okay, to achieve the shadow shapes. Okay, that's what is going to be most time consuming in this painting, is breaking down those shapes. Now, what's going to happen is you will lose the thread, so to speak, meaning it's going to get so complicated, and unless you have that personality where you can draw every little rock and work that, and fine, if that's what you want to do, perfect. If not, try to simplify even the rocks. Try to look for the bigger shapes, the effect areas, and just concentrate on a few choice areas that the light is hitting the rocks and creating a nice glow, a nice color contrast, value contrast. That's what we're kind of looking for here. Now here I added a little bit more of that. That was actually burnt sienna, a little orange. I think there was a little bit of yellow ochre in that wash, where you see the little embellishments of the warm tones. The reason for that is that there were some very chromatic. Chroma is the intensity. So if you hear me say chroma, that means the intensity of the color. And what I'm doing here is I'm just applying some darks in and around those shapes that we just put down. And you also notice too that it's always good when you're doing a watercolor painting is to have a is to basically have a blow dryer right next to you. The reason for that is that you want to speed things along, and you want to get right to your next wash after the first wash is applied. So since with watercolor we work from light to dark, we have to apply these washes in stages. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to establish the rock shapes. And I'm going to be doing this pretty much throughout the entire painting. That's what is going to be, again, the most time-consuming portion of this painting, is really just getting around the rocks. The sky and the water is relatively easy. We can get that a little darker, lighter, but I want to try to keep this painting. The day I was there was very bright, kind of like a hazy September afternoon, and I want to try to keep that feeling in this painting. The sky had a little haze to it, and over the Atlantic Ocean right there in the back. So here I am looking at the photograph. I'm looking for those definite or obvious rock formations that are probably larger. Those are the ones that I'm seeking out, because those are the ones that will identify this place. If someone who had gone there and painted there or just took pictures, they'll know this area just by the shapes of the rocks, right? Now, does every little rock have to be accounted for? Absolutely not. That's what photography is for. We're trying to get a visual impression of what we're seeing here. So, we want to create poetry when we paint. We want to have colors that are in nature, but that we can, accentuate and exaggerate to a degree. If you are more of a colorist painter, I kind of like the naturalism personally, but if you want to add more color, be my guest. Just make sure you stay with the values of everything, and then you'll be fine. Um, yeah, so more now you can see I switched down to a smaller brush, and I realized that um, I better move to a bigger brush because that might take a lot of time. So you have to realize that you need to block things in larger, and work from the big to small. Okay, that's why I abandoned the smaller brush for now, but I'll come back to it later on when I have to make some adjustments and little crags inside the rocks, little crevices and things like that. So you can see that the rock shapes are starting to take shape to some degree. Um, I'm kind of blocking in and chiseling so you can see where the shadow sides are and the top sides are. And what's interesting is that that color underneath that we put down, that sort of wet into wet green and brown, is really, it's starting to come through. And just like in the oil painting, uh, the block in, it's very similar. I mean, a lot of the things that we're going to see in at the end of this painting will probably be areas and passages that we see right now. Um, you know, maybe not a lot of them, but there will be some things poking through, just like the color, the warm tones that you'll see coming through, and some of the greens. And we'll come back and we can always accentuate those green areas too. But what we wanted here is we wanted to break up all the coolness and the dark shadows with those warm tones. So we wanted to make this inviting, and we wanted to make it look as natural as we see it in the photograph. There was a lot of interesting moss creating those brown stains, and some green stuff too. Lots and lots of vegetation on this area. Um, there are also cormorants drying themselves on the rock in the distance. Unfortunately, they weren't in this photograph, but I did, when I was there, take a couple of pictures. Now here what I'm doing is, so this is basically the greens that I'm using are sap green and permanent green. And to get the permanent green a little brighter, I was adding cadmium yellow, okay, to give it a little bit more intensity. So that's what I did there. And here now I'm just adding a bit of texture to the rocks by dry brushing. Okay, you see how the brush is kind of pushed in. That's hopefully in class I'll be able to do a few of these things. Okay, so here it is. This is the first part, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you on Friday. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye now.